I would have been able to come out successfully a lot sooner if I had been white, for sure. It was not a case of like, oh, we don't believe asexuality exists. Like, most of my friends were queer emo kids who spent all their time on Tumblr. Like, they thought that these labels were awesome, they believed in them, and even in the most liberal of circles, they were like, but not you though. But when they said you don't look asexual, I was the dorkiest, nerdiest looking kid. Like, put any stereotype on, I was ticking those with the exception of me being black. So I know that that was what made a difference, and I think it still, unfortunately, makes a difference.
What do you want people to know about asexuality? Thanks for coming to the podcast, Yasmin. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very, very excited. Really looking forward to having you on the podcast, actually, for a couple reasons. One, I read the Stonewall report.
Oh, thank you.
The one in your on your Insta,
Yeah.
in your links. And it spoke about there being 1 to 2% asexual people. And I believe it was the UK, right? Was it?
Yeah.
1 to 2% asexual people, which I thought was interesting for a couple of reasons. One, because that number is higher than I thought.
Yeah, it's not that small when you think about it.
It was higher than I thought. And I don't think I can, I was really racking my mind. I don't think I've spoken to someone knowingly, anyways, knowing that they're asexual. Maybe I have and I just haven't known, but I don't think I have. And then I read something else. I don't know if it was the same report or another report. It spoke about most asexual people not coming out, which may be the reason why I've never come. Because if the number's that high, I feel like I should have met someone, but I don't know. Maybe it's because people aren't coming out or whatnot. But I thought it'd be very, very interesting to speak to you, to hear your experience and everything, just to learn. Just quite educational for myself. And also, when I originally reached out to you, you spoke about how you hadn't been asked about coming to talk about your black experience or your black British experience before, which I found quite shocking. And it'll be interesting to understand that and the asexuality and then the intersection between those and your experience and how that's, understand a bit more about you and everything. So thank you for coming down anyways.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Let's start off on the black side of things, on the blackness. My own journey in discovering my acceptance of my blackness. So just to make it very short, which isn't about me, I grew up in a I was born here, West African household. So, but blackness was never necessarily a concept because it's just what it is. My school was very diverse. My area is very diverse. So again, it wasn't really a thing. When I got a bit older and I started to read certain things and, come into myself a bit more, that's when I started to embrace it some more. And that's what my journeys look like in a bit of a nutshell. I'd be interested to understand what your journey has looked like. I mean, but what your journey in embracing your blackness has looked like for yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm from a Trinidadian family, and I always grew up in Reading, which is definitely more diverse now than I think it was when I was younger. Like in primary school, there were there was one black boy in my class. I was the only black girl, and then there was like a mixed race boy, and that was kind of it until like year 4, year 6. And then in later primary school, there were some more mixed race girls and a few more black boys, but I was still the only like fully black girl. So I kind of was quite conscious of the fact that I kind of stood out quite a bit when I was younger. And I didn't really have any black friends when I was younger, and I wanted to, but I think that I was, well, similarly to how I am now, I'm a huge heavy metal fan. And when I was younger, I was like really into like Green Day and like rock bands, and people found that kind of weird. So I didn't really have any friends in primary school. And then in secondary school, I think that was a bit more diverse. There were more black girls, but again, I don't know, I guess because of my interests, people didn't really like hang out with me that much. So I ended up hanging out with all the emo kids pretty much. And then, so I've always kind of felt like I've been on the fringes of my young community for a long time, which kind of impacted my experience because it's like I was always very comfortable being black and very proud of it, but I also didn't feel like outside of hanging out with like my family and like my mom's friends, I didn't really like have that in my friendship groups, and it was kind of the same at university and college and pretty much throughout most of my life. But then at the same time, I feel like all of my work has been very impacted by me being Black. So it's always been kind of weird. And I found like since I started working in London more, it's like then I'm conscious of the fact that I'm like not a Londoner. I feel like being Black and not a Londoner is like a slightly different vibe. Like I feel kind of like out of the loop. So yeah, it's always been quite weird for me.
Would you say you've gone on a journey to embrace your Blackness, or has that just been something that you, because you grew up in a Trinidadian household, that's just always been a thing?
um, I mean, I feel like I've kind of had to. I don't know. I think kind of growing more confident in it did take a while in terms of just like appearance, I guess. When you are the only like Black girl in your friendship group or in your class, you're kind of conscious of the fact that you don't look like everyone else, and people kind of point that out to me. So I kind of had to like grow more confident in like my complexion and my appearance and my features, and like I was very much like not the cute friend. I was very I was very sexualized the whole time. People would always comment on like my body shape and my butt and all of that, but they would never say that I was like pretty. It was always like my white friends and my Asian friends that people said were pretty. So I kind of had to like grow my confidence like in that respect and realize that like my Blackness was not something that made me like less good looking.
Would you, and then you spoke about how when you were younger, well, you still are, but you was into heavy metal, you was pretty much doing your own thing.
Yeah.
So you maybe, I suppose, how I read that is that you're not like conforming to societal norms, you're just doing your own thing. I wrote a newsletter fairly recently for 1,000 Voices about finding your voice. And in that, just to make it very short, it was about basically coming to your own, ignoring societal expectations and whatever, and just becoming literally yourself, your own person. And then therefore you can find your voice. With yourself, did you go through any sort of journey where you were coming into your own and embracing, all right, this is who I am, and you can like me if you like me, you can like what I've got to say, or you can whatever. Like, was that a journey you went on, or?
I mean, I feel like I was so like counterproductively individualistic from a young age. Maybe it's because I'm an only child, I don't know. But I've always just kind of been like, or maybe I just like internalized those like Disney Channel messages of like be yourself a little too much. Because even when I was in school, I was very conscious of that. I could just listen to different music. I could just wear different clothes on non-school uniform day. I could just act differently, and then I would have friends at lunchtime. But I was like, well, then I'd be hanging out with people that don't really like me. For me, what's the point? I'd rather just sit by myself. And that was always my mentality. And I think listening to a lot of like pop punk, like do your own thing messaging also made a difference there. So yeah, I've always had that in me. And I don't know why, because I think it's usually a human instinct to at least try and conform enough to have a social life. I don't know why I didn't care about that. But yeah, I do think that that's kind of boded well for me in the long run, because I can kind of say like I people will like see things of me when I was like little and be like, gosh, you're the same. Like you're so similar. I was like, yeah, I've kind of kept the same energy my whole life. And I don't know, maybe it's because my mom just kind of like let me do my own thing. She never really tried to rein me in or make me like behave in a particular way. And I was always pretty well behaved, but she was never like, oh, you should probably dress differently, or oh, don't listen to that, or oh, people are gonna think you're weird. She was kind of like, oh,
She let you do you.
yeah.
Who do you look up to?
Oh, probably my mom, just because she was so good at raising me. Like I'm one of those people that's like besties of my mom. Like she's very chill. We really get along, and she always just like let me take whatever path I wanted to take. And then that kind of helped to motivate me to kind of be good at it, because I was like, you placed trust in me to do good. So I've got to like make the most of that.
On asexuality,
Mhm.
before we get into it properly, can you define for people who aren't aware of what it is, what asexuality is, and also what ace is as well?
Yeah, so ace is pretty much just like an abbreviation of asexual. And asexual means when you experience little to no sexual attraction towards anyone else, regardless of their gender. So it's a type of sexual orientation. It's just not directed anywhere.
What are some of the common myths that you hear about asexuality and aromanticism and that sort of thing, or in the ace
Yeah.
community?
Well, being aromantic, for those who don't know, that means when you experience little to no romantic attraction. So I happen to be both, but you can be asexual about being aromantic, and you can be aromantic about being asexual. But I don't experience sexual or romantic attraction, and I feel like the kind of stereotypes and misconceptions are slightly different for both. I always say that when you're asexual, people think there's something wrong with your body, and when you're aromantic, people think there's something wrong with your soul because it's so tied to the concept of romantic love, which is a very kind of like subjective thing. Um, but yeah, people tend to just think that there's something physically or mentally wrong with you that has caused it. It's kind of like the overarching theme. It's either that it's like a bad personality trait, it's having negative attitudes, it's having bad experiences, it's having a physical condition that's impacted your libido or your arousal or something, even though that actually has nothing to do with asexuality at all. Or that you just don't like anybody, you think you're too good for anybody, or that you're too ugly for anybody. So it's like a whole mishmash of things, but they're all pretty negative.
And what's your own asexual journey looks like? Particularly, what I'm interested in understanding is what that I don't know what you'd call it, that coming out phase was like for you. First of all, for yourself in learning, because I would assume, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd assume when you're young and then you discovered, like, oh shit, I'm asexual. You probably you probably didn't know what the word was for it. So you probably might have been confused because you don't know what's happening, or I'm not liking people the way other people like people, etc., etc. And then later on, then you find the label. Okay, great. That was what I am. What's that journey been like for you? And then up until the point where you got the label and you understood, okay, this is what it is. This is what I am.
Well, um, yeah, well, you're right. I definitely did not know what the terminology was initially. I mean, I feel like everyone starts off experiencing sexuality in a very asexual way, and then they don't. So it wasn't until like early puberty, I think, when kids started like fancying each other and wanting to like go out with each other, and I was like, we're 11, what does this mean? But I was always kind of like, I don't see this for me, I'm not gonna force it, I assume it's gonna kick in at some point. But I was already kind of not impressed with the effects it was having on like my peers, like girls fighting over boys, like the dynamic in the playground just like shifted immediately. Like people weren't just wanting to skip and play together anymore. Like there was this drama. And so I kind of, when I was going to secondary school, I decided I wanted to go to an all girls school because I had a theory that if there were no boys, then no one would notice that there was anything different about me, and no one would care about dating or sex, and it would never come up, which is a very naive thought from my 11-year-old self. Because as soon as I got to your girls' school, it was like the opposite, because everyone felt deprived of boys and thus cared even more. And then it became even more obvious. And then I kind of reached a stage where people were like, Yasmin, why aren't you doing anything? Why aren't you interested? Like, especially in this time period, it was like peak Twilight, peak Jonas Brothers. I feel like it was just like a thirsty era for teenage girls. It's like everyone was like, all the media was geared towards you fancying someone or something and being very over the top about it. And so it just kind of made it even more obvious that I wasn't feeling the same way. And consequently, everyone then started projecting like, what's wrong with you? Are you gay? Are you stunted? Are you sick? Like, what is it? And that was kind of what made me at like 13, 14 years old have to do a lot of a self-analysis and be like, oh my God, like, what is it? I wasn't innately concerned, but other people kind of made it seem like more of a big deal. And then I kind of, because it was also like the peak Tumblr era, if you remember Tumblr.
I remember Tumblr. I had a pop-in page back in the day, yeah.
And I feel like in like certain, at least some quarters of Tumblr, it was kind of cool to have like a label and be into like social justice and all those things. And so it was kind of cool to have a niche. And I think that was kind of why I was able to discover the term asexual quite quickly. I think by the time I was like 15. But then I was, looking online and looking through blogs and looking at YouTube videos, and I was like, okay, it's a lot of pink-haired white teenagers here. I don't look like that. Why is it only one demographic of people that I'm seeing in this community? But still, I was like, well, hey, I still fit the word. So I told people, hey, here's the answer to your question. I'm asexual. And they were like, no, you're not. You don't look asexual to me. And so I was kind of like, okay, well, back to the drawing board then, because even though I know no one believes me, on the basis of my appearance, I just could not compute a Black girl being asexual. And so it kind of just went back to all the initial explanations, which very much went into she must be stunted somehow. The language people used back then was a lot more harsh and politically incorrect. Sure, you know which words I'm talking about. And yeah, and then that kind of became quite detrimental because it kind of, my teachers kind of picked up on it, that people assumed I was slow. And you do not want to be the Black girl in a state school that people decide is slow. Because then it was like they were kind of very open. And like one of my teacher's nicknames for me, and this is an inappropriate word, but I'll say it for context, was Spasmin. And he would casually say that in the class.
What?
And I was like, ha ha ha, funny.
In front of everybody.
Yeah. There were multiple instances of teachers doing things like that. And so I was kind of like, yeah, I am dropping this asexual thing. I am never mentioning this again. I am just gonna try and be like under the radar in this and just avoid any conversation. And I kind of just stuck to that until like I'd kind of finished school. I did not tell people in college. I just tried to like just avoid the topic because I kind of knew where it would go. And I was like, this is not a good label to be stuck with when you're trying to like progress in your education. But one of the good things was that because I'd been kind of stuck with people calling me that for so many years, it made me like so obsessed with the idea of proving people wrong that I like immediately got a scholarship after secondary school and went to a private school for a few years and then made sure I got a first at university, and then I went to like top universities, and I was like very like goal driven as a result in an almost neurotic way though.
With that, first of all, that spasmin is nuts. I can't even.
I know.
I can't even believe it. I honestly can't believe it. That's very for a grown man to be calling a child in your class. That's mad. But yeah, hopefully he's not teaching anymore.
No, you know what's weird? He has a job hypnotizing children to help with their mental health issues.
Interesting.
So yeah, I don't know.
Interesting. What was the coming out process like for you with people close to you, like friends and family? And
Well,
what was the
that
reaction?
kind of included my friends, unfortunately.
Okay.
I say, yeah, I did not have good friendship situations for a while. Now I do. And I've made peace with all the people from secondary school now. In fact, most of them are fans of me now, funnily enough. But yeah, I feel like in terms of my family, I mean, I know my dad like did not understand it, but I feel like, you know, I guess it's kind of probably similar. Unlike West African culture and Caribbean culture, it's like, you don't really want your kid to be that sexual anyway. So, so when your teenage daughter or relative is like, by the way, I'm not going to be dating or having sex, just so you know, it's not really, like, I'm not going to be mad about it. They're kind of like, okay, great. Like, you're well behaved was kind of the interpretation. That did shift a bit when people realized I wasn't just well behaved and that I'm actually like just not straight. I think people just thought I was a very well behaved straight person. So yeah, definitely got a bit more contentious when people realized that. But my mom was always like very cool about it. I don't think we ever really had a conversation about it as such. I think she would have been quite perplexed if I came home and went, hey, this is my boyfriend. She'd be like, I didn't think we were doing that.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like, you? I think there was a point where I was like, oh, by the way, you know that thing I don't do? There's actually a word for that, I think. We had that conversation while watching EastEnders or something and then just continued with the day. And so, yeah, I think now my kind of relatives just try not to talk about it to me. I mean, they'll be like, oh, cool seeing the things you're doing, but I don't know. I think people don't really want to go there.
Yeah. And then you came out publicly in I've got the date, October 11th, 2017.
Yes.
What was that like? And why, actually? Why at that time?
I think it just kind of came from because I was already doing like modeling and stuff, which is also a plot twist, glow up for the not cute friend. That kind of meant I had to spend more time on social media. And then even though I'd already dipped my toe in the whole asexual community online thing and realized I don't think there's a space in this for me. I don't really see myself in this community, even though the term fits me. But then as I was spending more and more time online, you know, the algorithms, they kept bringing things to me. They kept showing me things. And I'm like, and at this point, it had been quite a few years. And I was like, it's still just white kids still? Like no one Black is talking about this? And then I was sitting there thinking, well, couldn't I just do that? Like, would that not fill the gap a little bit if I just said something. So that was kind of my idea of like, oh, I'll just like mention it in passing. Like I didn't think people were gonna care that much. I would have said it ages ago. I didn't think
Mm.
that it was gonna be a thing that I would keep talking about. But I just thought, let me just throw just something in there just to diversify this pool a little bit. Um, and then people were like, oh my God, like I never see people talking about this. Oh, can you talk about it now? Can you talk about it here? Can you come to this place? And I was like, oh God, okay, people like
Mm.
actually want to hear me discussing this. And I think at the time I was still in an undergrad. I was studying like sociology at the time. And then I didn't really start focusing on it more until I kind of finished my master's, which was in crime science. So all things that I did not end up going down in the end, but kind of genuinely thought at the time that I would use those. So yeah, I didn't really anticipate that it would become when it's become.
I have a lot of respect for people that are unapologetic in their truth, and also who step into uncharted territory. Because
Yeah.
you really stepped into uncharted territory at that point in time. Because you've gone through some negative experience when you was younger, when you came out with other people around you, and then had to sort of hide that side away for a while, and then decide to come out in the biggest way possible. Just let me do it on social media. But I have a lot of respect for people that do that because it's very difficult. And I know you get a lot of backlash and all that kind of thing. But I do think it's really good. Just like you said, there wasn't any representation anyway. So you was probably the first Black person that was really visible
Yeah.
in that space and in that world. What's the journey been like for you over the past 6 and a couple months, years?
Yeah. It's weird to think that it's been like that long. I think because of the pandemic, it almost doesn't feel like it's been that much time. But it was quite weird because I think that initially I kind of got thrown into the deep end a bit because there were so few people talking about it, people were like more interested than I was like prepared for. And I think because I wasn't like active in the community, I didn't really know people. I wasn't, and I'd spent so long trying not to talk about it with like all the strength of my being to then be known for talking about it and then to then be judged en masse for the very thing I was trying not to mention was like quite weird. And because like as soon as I started doing things in the media, that was kind of like my introduction to, again, how things are different if you're Black as well as asexual. Like I did a documentary that was with BBC Three, and I did not like the editing of it at all. And then I did another one with Sky, and they kind of cut me out of the televised version of it. I was the only Black person in it. I was the only one that got cut out. And they were like, oh, we don't really know if you make as much, like it'll be as understandable for the audience. For me, and I'm like, well, all the white people are,
Yeah.
so what's the difference?
Yeah.
And then on the online version, like the comments I got compared to the comments that other people got, like I had people saying like, oh, I hope you get raped and deported, like things like that. And the white people in the documentary did not get those kind of comments at all. And that's when I was like, okay, this is going to be different for me. This is going to be complicated for me. And that has definitely continued being a thing. But I think at the same time, it's also been good in the sense that I've managed to kind of challenge people's ideas like from the get-go, like where some places think, okay, we're not going to talk to her because it's too challenging. But in other places are like, hey, this is different from what we've seen already. And then that's kind of allowed me to do like magazines and be on different platforms and go to different countries and do things that I never really saw myself doing in that space and kind of move the goalposts forward a little bit and like just progress the conversation outside of it just being like, what is asexuality 101, which is kind of where it's been stuck at for the past 20 years.
How do you navigate in a space where there isn't really anyone else that came before you, and there's maybe some more, no, I don't know too many, but in the space, maybe there's a couple more now, but how do you navigate? Who do you talk to? Where do you look for advice?
That's kind of been the complicated thing because there's absolutely no blueprint, which means that it's freeing in the sense because it's like, well, I guess I can do anything, but then it's also like, what the hell do I do?
Yeah.
Like I can't look at anyone and be like, oh, well, they've gone and done this, and this is kind of what the next steps are. But I have people turn to me being like, hey, Yasmin, what are you gonna do to change the world today? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, there are things I could do, but I don't know, it's not easy just doing them. So it has been hard because it's such uncharted territory that I don't have that many people I can ask for advice or talk to. Um, yeah, so it's very much just me throwing whatever I can at the wall and seeing what sticks and just hoping that people give me a chance or take me seriously or even understand what I'm going for. But yeah, I've definitely been like lone wolfing it for like the majority of the time.
Yeah, I can imagine. What's been the most difficult part of this journey?
I guess just I don't know, I think there's kind of a there's the social element, there's the kind of exposure to just like the weirdest people like online, like when you're getting like hate from like thousands and thousands of people, it's like it's so weird and it's so like not the kind of thing that I think humans are built to understand. So you never really know what impact it has on you because you're just kind of like, this is so bizarre. I don't even, my brain doesn't even know how to interpret how weird all of this is. And then also, I guess just for me, when I find myself in certain spaces, like even good spaces, like if I'm at like I got to go to Parliament a few times next month, and I've got to, and I've been like opening New York Pride with like people like Billy Porter and all these amazing like inspirational people, and I'm like sitting on the back of a car waving to this crowd of like thousands, and I'm like, this is so weird. Like all this stuff is like
Mm,
so weird for my brain to interpret, and sometimes I feel like I am not. It's not even imposter syndrome because I know I'm good at it, but I'm also just like this is so weird for me. I don't know. I guess I still kind of see myself as being the weird kid in secondary school that no one like really wanted to speak to. So I'm like, God, what a plot twist. Every time I do something, I'm like, this is so random for me. And I think
yeah,
just kind of in coming to terms of that is still quite weird.
it must be quite difficult because I've seen on your social media some of the comments that you get, and those are just the ones that you share. So
Yeah.
I've seen some of the comments you get, and some of them are very wild.
Yeah.
And like for us here, 1,000 Voices, like we get some negative comments, and even when I read them, I'm like, man, like I don't even. I tried. I mean, you look at feedback, but I ignored some of the negative stuff because it's not constructive. It's just
Yeah.
talking shit and saying whatever, and I just throw it aside. And I even hide or delete comments that are just negative. They're not constructive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a believer. Have your voice, have your say. If you don't agree with me,
Mm-hmm.
cool, whatever. But when you're just being racist or saying something
Mm-hmm.
stupid, I'll delete the comment
Mm-hmm.
and I don't interact with it. You get a lot of these types of comments. What does that do? Like when you're logging onto your social media and you're seeing messages, like all these mad messages and stuff, what does that do to you? Like how do you handle that kind of thing?
I think I always say it sounds so bad, but I'm like, thank God I got bullied in school because I feel like that was helpful in
Mm,
the long run because I'm like, even part of my mind's always like, well, at least you're not stuck with them in a classroom. At least like you can just escape it. You could close the tab. You know it's still happening, but you don't have to. You're not physically stuck with it. And I think that my experiences in school gave me quite like a thick skin more so than average. Like I'll have friends that are like, how are you still like joyously doing things? And I'm like, I don't know. Like it's annoying, but it's not upsetting. I'm kind of like it'll chip at me, but I won't crack under the pressure. Like I might be like more
mm,
irritable for like a few hours, but like that's kind of it. Um but I think in my head, I try to interpret it in a way that makes me kind of feel like a rock star in the 80s. Like, like
mm,
when like rock musicians, they would do anything and everyone would be like clutching their pearls over it and they'd be like very scandalized. And I'm like, there's something kind of rock and roll about all these people being so mad at me for doing nothing that controversial in the grand scheme of the internet. And that's what I find quite funny about it. I'm like, out of all the things on the internet that are harmful, that are negative, that are illegal, that you could be like putting your efforts into, you're mad that I wore a short skirt at a festival, really? Like,
mm.
it's things like that where I'm like, okay, if you guys are going to be so scandalized by everything, then stay tuned because it's going to get worse.
Where do you think that hate comes from?
I think it's just people not knowing how to interpret me. Because I kind of get it from like all angles. Sometimes, I mean, it's mainly, I can say, gender critical feminists, which is such a weird thing that's the particular group that doesn't like me. But I do, like, I've had it from within the asexual community. I've had it from the queer community. Like, I've had it from all kinds of places. And I think it's literally just like people are just not used to seeing someone like me in the spaces that I'm in getting attention from like big platforms and big places, and they're kind of like, okay, we got to bring her down a peg or two, because who the hell is this girl? What is she talking about? And why is she the one that gets to do it? So I think that that's kind of where it comes from, because otherwise I'm like, I don't see why you're so intent on like trying to bring me down a few pegs. You must think I've gotten like too high or something.
Yeah, yeah. I do see some of the comments. They do look quite crazy, and it seems like it comes from a wide spectrum of people, all sorts of different types of people. It's
It's like so many women, which is like so weird, I think.
well, like you said, maybe it's because they don't know how to interpret you. Maybe because they don't understand.
Yeah.
Like there's some quote people fear what they don't understand or that kind of thing. So maybe you can spin that in a way, and like if they don't understand what asexuality is, or they don't, yeah, just don't get it, then maybe that's where it's coming from. Perhaps I don't know, to be honest, but
Yeah.
it does seem like a lot that you get.
And I think that's why I kind of like to make a point of it, because at the same time, while I do like quite obviously get a lot, I'll still have people be like, no one would be mad about it. Nobody cares. There's no such thing as hating on asexual people. And I'm like, look, I literally have examples of how this works in an intersectional way. This is how it happens. This is like, use me as a case study. Because at least then I feel like it's been put to good use. At least then it can be a learning experience instead of just a very unfortunate Sunday for Yasmin.
I think when you're stepping into uncharted territory as well, there's always going to be an element of people who don't understand, and therefore you're going to get a level of hate. And then there's examples of that historically. The one example that comes to mind is Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
And he was doing his thing, and at the time he was the most hated man in America.
I think people forget about that part.
Yeah. And then after he's passed away, now he's loved. We got Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah.
Literally, he's loved. But back then they hated him.
It's like, well, they assassinated him. Like,
Yeah.
I think people forget like how disliked he was for saying what is now more acceptable.
Yeah, well, it's like it's a very tough space to be in. Like when you're stepping into uncharted territory and you're really trying to advocate and campaign for something that you really believe in, and you're the first one there.
Yeah.
Man, it opens you up to a lot of hate, and there's a lot of people who who probably have things that they really believe in. That are outside of the societal norm. I'm a strong believer anyway. Society clearly is broken in some way, shape and form. And that's why we have the issues that we have. So we need people who are outside, who step out of that, look at it and be like, this is wrong. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make some change here and do X, Y, Z. But when you do that, you're going to get hate. And then it's not little hate. Martin Luther King was the most hated man in America. You're getting a lot of mad comments, even from teachers to social media, whatever. It's not an easy space to be in, but I think that it's sad, but I feel like it just you kind of have to be prepared to go through it in order to drive the type of change that you want to see. But it's not easy though. I don't think it's easy. I haven't been there before, but just seeing the sheer volume of stuff, I'm like, I don't know how I would personally cope with that if I'm seeing that every single time I open my social media.
Yeah, I think on one hand, I'm always like, I'm so surprised that I'm the person doing this and like I did not see this for me. But on the other hand, I'm like, oh, thank God it was me, because fortunately I am pretty good with that kind of thing. Like I think that for a lot of other people that would be like absolutely detrimental to their mental health. Whereas for me, it's just mildly irritating, which I don't know why. I don't know why I had like such a resistant bone in my body from childhood, but it's boding well for me now.
How do you see the Black asexual experience? Is it in any way, in your opinion, different from just the broader asexual experience?
Yeah, I mean, I would have been able to come out successfully a lot sooner if I had been white, for sure. Because it was not a case of like, oh, we don't believe asexuality exists. Like most of my friends were queer emo kids who spent all their time on Tumblr. Like they thought that these labels were awesome. They believed in them. And even in the most liberal of circles, they were like, but not you though. Anyone else but not you. And that was kind of like my first example of, okay, this is what the difference is. And I think that when you're part of like such a hypersexualized demographic, that's always gonna make a difference when it comes to talking about asexuality in particular. Like so much of the hate I get online is 98% white people. And they're always talking about my appearance, and it doesn't matter what I'm wearing, because it's almost like I can almost test it. Like I've just worn like jeans and a t-shirt, and then they're like, well, your face is giving sexual. Your lips seem sexual. Your eyes seem sexual. It's like, so it's just any black feature I have that you guys are seeing as being inherently too sexual for me to be asexual. And thus you're mad about it because you think I'm hot, but you can't have me. And now you're aggressive about it. And and I feel like that is just like that's just a long running arc that just Black people have experienced for hundreds of years is that kind of hypersexualization. And I know that that is what has made such a big difference. Like modeling and stuff aside, when I was in like a kid, people were like commenting on my body and stuff, and at the same time not believing that I was asexual. And at the time I didn't think about it. I didn't put two and two together, but in hindsight I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure that that had something to do with it. When they said you don't look asexual, I was the dorkiest, nerdiest looking kid. Like put any stereotype on, I was ticking those with the exception of me being Black. So I know that that was what made a difference, and I think it still unfortunately makes a difference.
You said, I saw it on your social media, on one of your posts, that it took you so, I'm going to paraphrase it because I can't remember the exact wording, but you said something along the lines of it took you so long to become comfortable with your body. And I'm assuming that that's to do with the bullying that you spoke about, that you went through when you was younger. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, I think it was always, well, it's kind of just like just my whole, again, like I was not the cute friend. I was not seeing people that looked like me on TV at all. I was not like, this was before the modeling industry started really liking putting Black girls in things. And if they did, then they were usually like lighter or more racially ambiguous. And I would look at all the Black singers and none of them really got any darker than Beyonce. And that was kind of like, and you know, you do internalize that when you're younger. And I was always kind of like, and then when you have people projecting all this other stuff onto you, I thought, well, maybe I'm only asexual. I only think I'm asexual because I'm not confident. Maybe it's because I don't like how I look and other people don't like how I look. And then it wasn't until I got older and then I did like how I look. And I was like, okay, well, it definitely wasn't that. This is just how the cookie crumbled. But yeah, you definitely do have to like, I think particularly as a Black girl and when you're just not around many other people. And my mom's lighter than me too. So like, yeah, I didn't and then most of my friends, I mean, I had some mixed race friends, but yeah, I just didn't really have many people around me that looked like me. So I was kind of conscious of like looking different than everyone else. And I had glasses and braces and acne and everything. So I was like, yeah, like people would be like people would literally say, like, me and my friend would be next to each other, and they would turn to my friend and be like, "Oh my God, you're so pretty, and Yasmin, you have great boobs." And I'm like, okay, they're not pretty. I was like, I'm gonna
Thank
say,
you.
like, I guess, thanks. So yeah, I was always kind of like, I always kind of had that, but then I've also kind of, again, just being someone that was into heavy metal and was kind of more interested in the alternative community and alternative fashion, even there in a space where it's like everyone looks so different and so quirky, they were all white too. So even in like the spaces where it's like, this is where the outcasts go, I was like, all the outcasts look the same here and everywhere. So yeah, I always kind of had that.
Has anyone ever tried any form of correction therapy on you?
Fortunately, I was so resistant to everything that no one could really get that far. But I remember when I was in university and me, as I mentioned, being a neurotic perfectionist and wanting to get like firsts in everything, I was like very stressed out in my undergrad. And I went to like the school counselor for exam stress and stuff. And she started asking me about, you know, my life and everything. And she started asking about my sexuality. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm asexual. And she was like, oh, so I guess that's what you're going to want to be working on here. Like, I guess that's why you're here, right? So we can overcome that. And I was like, no, it was about exam stress. Thank you. It's not, that wasn't the concern. But I was like, and then in hindsight, I'm like, oh, it's interesting that that was like their immediate reaction was like, well, gotta fix that then. That's going to be a problem. And, you know, people would always kind of, again, suggest that there must be something physically wrong with me or mentally wrong with me or that I must be traumatized by something to the point where when I was younger, I was racking my brain thinking, did anything happen? I don't feel like it did. But people said that so casually, like, oh, you probably got molested. And I'm like, did I? Wait, what? Why does everyone say that to me? So yeah, there's definitely people trying to take it in that direction to make you feel like you needed to be fixed or to fix yourself. But I was always kind of like, I'm happy with how the cookie crumbled, so you guys can't change it.
It's sort of like people going to like Christian camps and then praying the gay away.
Yeah.
In a way. Yeah, it's kind of like that.
There is an asexual form of that. Only in our case, it's through medical settings. because that is people's instinct. It's not really religious. I don't think religious groups really care that much about the people that probably aren't going to be having sex. But like medically speaking, there's still this idea that you need to be experiencing sexuality in a very particular way, having sex a certain amount, desiring sex a certain amount. Otherwise, there's something clinically wrong with you that needs to be fixed through therapy or medication. And that is still very much a thing that is still medicalized in the UK. So yeah, that's kind of where it comes from.
What do you want people to know about asexuality?
I guess just that it's not a reflection of anything. It doesn't reflect your personality or your appearance or how fulfilled your life can be or how you connect with people or what your interests are and all these other things that for some reason people really do like assume when it comes to asexuality. It's literally just a type of sexual orientation. It's just like one aspect of who you are. And it's not an unfortunate thing. It's not something you need to respond like sympathetically to or feel sorry for them. Like it's literally, it's just one thing and it's not a big deal. And it's also not that weird. Like when we were talking about like the percentage, it might sound small, like 1 to 2%, but that's the same percentage of ginger people. And most people have met a ginger person. Like it's not that wild. So it's not that uncommon when you think about it.
Yeah, no, 1 to 2% is quite high. That's what I thought. When I don't know if I don't know if that was at the start of this or before this. Actually, I don't know when we spoke about that. Just for context, if it was before we started speaking, it was a report that I read in Yasmin's bio Insta, and it said that the Stonewall report that 1 to 2% of the UK population identifies as asexual.
Yeah.
And I was like, I thought that number was quite high. 'Cause I don't, other than yourself, literally, I don't think I've ever knowingly spoke to someone that's asexual. Maybe I have, but I probably have if the numbers are that high. I just don't think I remember any. But then when you speak about your story, like your coming out story and what the experience was like in school, when you first started to tell people, I can understand why it might be difficult for someone to come out and say, all right, this is who I am, this is what I'm, this is why I am, this is who I am, etc., because of the backlash you can get. And because people don't understand it as well and cause all sorts of issues. And it's just a difficult thing to do. What would you say to someone who is asexual or maybe feels like they are, or, you know, just they're in that space and they don't really know what to do, who to talk to, and they maybe have some trouble coming out about it?
Yeah, I mean, I always say that like other people's reactions to you is not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of what they don't know, because I think it's quite easy to interpret that and like internalize that and think, oh my God, there is something wrong with me. Like, I'm never gonna have a happy life. No one's ever gonna love me or be interested in me because of this, because that's kind of like what people project onto you. So I'd always just say like that that's not necessarily true. It's not something that limits anything that you can do. Like there are so many other aspects to life aside from sexual attraction. And then also that like it doesn't have to be a big deal. I think it's, and I know people probably see my work and assume that like me being asexual is like what I think is my most important trait as a person, but it's like honestly it's one of the least important. And I think that having spent so much of my life trying not to mention it just meant that I had to kind of find other aspects of myself that I thought were more important. And it's like it really is just one aspect of you. It's not the be all and end all. It doesn't have to impact your life that much. Like it is just something that you can just live with and flourish with, and it does not have to be that deep.
What would you say to someone? So, like I said earlier, I have a lot of respect for people who step out into uncharted territory and they're trying to drive some kind of change in this world. And we need more people doing that. I think we need a hell of a lot more people doing that. But it's a difficult space to be in. One, because you don't know what to do. You're literally, there's no blueprint. There's no book you can pick up and be like, okay, how do I do X, Y, Z? Can't do that. And two, just because it's just tough. Friends and family and society or whatnot, you can get a lot of backlash because of that. And you've experienced both of those things, no blueprint and the backlash. What would you say to someone who's wanting, who's passionate about something, they believe in something, they want to do some good work and drive some change, but they're stuck, they don't know what to do, and they're scared about the backlash as well?
I mean, it's hard because it's like the backlash is potentially inevitable. So you're going to just have to try and come to terms with that part. Like if you're going to put yourself out there, there are going to be risks to that. People are going to react badly. Not everyone's going to get it, but you kind of just have to be prepared to focus more on the positive impact that you can make on people. And also not everything has to be as like public as what I'm doing. Like I feel like people that are like creating archives or creating resources or running blogs or doing or like doing a little student group or doing D&I in their workplace. Like all those things make a really big difference to lots of people, and your chances of backlash are diminished somewhat. So there are lots of things that you can do that might be like more organic to your interests, that are a bit less volatile and public facing. Yeah, I think like people kind of picture activism, they think that you have to be there on like a picket line, or you've got to be doing something really dramatic and flamboyant, like attracts all this attention. But I feel like the ecosystem only really works because there are people that are also just kind of doing more subtle things.
That's great. Finally, have we got any final words for
Just
us?
thank you for being the first Black British person to have me on one of their things. So,
Thank you for coming down.
thank you.
And have I missed out anything? Is there any particular final words that you have for our audience, or anything that you'd like for us to know?
Just that you can check out the Stonewall Report if you just type in Stonewall Asexual Report, Ace in the UK report, Yasmin Benoit report, whatever, and it'll come up because there's also good information about asexuality there, and also about asexual experiences and discrimination in the UK.
That's perfect. Thank you for coming down once again. Amazing conversation. Learned a lot, and I think that it's important as well, because when it's an area that isn't as well understood as it could or should be. So thank you for coming down and sharing and educating us and enlightening us. Much appreciated. And that's that for now. So this is 1000 Voices. We had Yasmin Benoit on the podcast. So for now, people, we're out.
Thank you.
If you would like to understand how you can use your voice to drive change, how you can craft compelling stories to move audiences, and for additional wisdom from the guests that we have on the podcast, sign up to our newsletter. Every single week, we send actionable pieces of advice to change makers like you. So if you haven't already, the sign up link for the newsletter will be in the description of this episode.